Hello and welcome to Twist List. Today we are looking at 10 amazing strongman feats of the past. For centuries strongmen have been entertaining crowds by their demonstrations of strength. Many strongmen relied on unique acts that would set them apart from other strongmen and usually claimed they were the only one in the world to perform such a feat. This list includes 10 of the most amazing and unique acts performed by the strongmen of yesteryear. At number 10 we have John Holtam, Cannonball King. John Holtam was a strongman from Denmark who drew immense crowds in cities around the world by perfecting the cannonball catch. He lost a couple of fingers the first time he tried, but he eventually got his technique worked out. With Holtam on one side of the stage and a cannon on the other, an assistant would fire a 50-pound ball which Holtam caught with his gloved hands and chest. The feat required immense strength, steely nerves, and lightning-fast reflexes. Several skeptics questioned the legitimacy of his act but were convinced after Holtam brought them on stage for a demonstration. Holtam appeared before royalty in Europe and was a great success in the US as well. Interesting fact, Holtam's initial attempt to catch the ball resulted in his losing 3 fingers. Holtam offered 3,000 francs to anyone who would perform a similar feat, but no one ever took him up on his challenge. The 9th spot on the list is occupied by Pierre Gasnier, French Hercules. Gasnier was born in France and was one of the first most influential of the old-time circus strongmen and performed for Barnum and Bailey's circus. Gasnier could rip a deck of cards in half, but his most famous feat was breaking a chain over his chest while expanding his rib cage. Interesting fact, Gasnier stood only 5'3" tall and weighed just 143.5 pounds and was able to lift a dumbbell weighing 260 pounds over his head. A feat that many strongmen twice his size could not do. Number 8 on our list is Arthur Saxon, the Iron Master. Arthur Saxon was a strongman and circus performer from the late 19th century into the early 20th century. Saxon made his name famous by a lift called the bent press. This is a type of weight training exercise where a weight is brought from shoulder level to overhead one-handed using the muscles of the back, legs, and arm, with which he set a world record of 370 pounds. Eventually Saxon's 2 brothers, Kurt and Herman Henning, joined the group as well, forming the Saxon Trio. The trio performed with circuses all over Europe. Interesting fact, during his performances Saxon would claim the act could not be repeated even by the famous muscleman Eugene Sandow, see number 3, and would open the stage for anyone who would want to attempt it. Unbeknownst to Saxon, in 1898, Sandow was in the audience and accepted the challenge. Initially, Sandow was unable to replicate the lift but then eventually was able to do it. Sandow took the Saxon Trio to court and won the case, with the judge ruling that he had handled the bell in exactly the same way as Saxon, which debunked Saxon's claim that Sandow failed the lift. At number 7 we have Angus McCaskill, Giant McCaskill. McCaskill was born on the Isle of Berneray in the Sound of Harris, Scotland, and emigrated to Nova Scotia. McCaskill was known as the world's largest true giant, no growth abnormalities. By the time he was 20 he was 7 feet 4 in, 223 centimeters, eventually reaching 7 feet 10 in, 236 centimeters, and weighed 580 pounds. In 1849 he entered show business and went to work for P.T. Barnum's circus, appearing next to General Topham. McCaskill's most famous feat was lifting a ship's anchor weighing 2,800 pounds to his chest. He also had the ability to carry barrels weighing over 300 pounds apiece under each arm. Interesting fact, Queen Victoria heard stories about McCaskill's great strength and invited him to appear before her to give a demonstration at Windsor Castle. She proclaimed him to be the tallest, stoutest and strongest man to ever enter the palace. Pierre Gasnier. Number 6 on the list is Thomas Singe. Thomas Singe held the titles of Britain's strongest youth and Britain's strongest man. However, Inch is best known for a dumbbell he created now called the Inch dumbbell. The dumbbell weighed 172 pounds 9 ounces. To keep the dumbbell from bending, it was made with extra thick handles, which ended up making it very popular because it was so difficult to lift. In his day, Thomas Singe was one of the few people that could lift the dumbbell and would offer £200 to anyone who could. Interesting fact, at the age of 72 Thomas Singe could still lift his namesake dumbbell. Even today very few people can lift it. The fifth spot on the list is occupied by Alexander Zas, the Iron Samson. Zas was born in Vilna, Poland, but lived his early years in Russia. Like many other strong men of his era, Zas was motivated to develop his strength when he attended a circus and saw the feats done by the circus strongman. Zas started with bending green branches and twigs, climbing trees, and running with homemade dumbbells and barbells. Later he trained under some of the great Russian professional strongmen. Zas developed tremendous strength that allowed him to carry a horse on his shoulders, but his greatest talent was bending steel bars and breaking chains, which were the centerpiece of his exhibitions. Interesting fact, in 1914, while serving in the Russian army during the First World War, Zas was wounded and taken prisoner by the Austrian forces. As a prisoner of war, he continued to develop his strength with the use of isometrics by pulling on the bars and chains. Zas escaped from prison and never returned to his homeland. Number 4 on the list is Louis Cyr. Louis Cyr was born in Quebec and weighed close to 18 pounds at birth. At the age of 12, Cyr was a lumberjack, and stories of his amazing strength told by his co-workers are legendary. At the age of 17, Cyr stood 5 feet 10 inches but weighed 230 pounds. His first public display of strength was in Boston during a strongest man competition, when he stunned the crowd by lifting a horse clear off the ground. Cyr returned to Quebec in 1882 for a brief tour and performed many acts of strength. Strongmen feats are often exaggerated, and Louis was no exception to this. However, many of his feats were formally documented by witnesses, including holding a platform of 18 men on his back. At the conclusion of his tour, Louis became a police officer in Montreal. Interesting fact, a district of Montreal is named Louis Cyr in his honor, located in Saint-Henri, where he patrolled as a police officer. Also, statues of Louis Cyr are located at Place des Hommes Forts and the Musée de la Civilisation in Quebec City. At the third place we have Eugene Sandow. Eugene Sandow is often referred to as the father of modern bodybuilding. Sandow was born in Prussia, now part of Germany, and began his career as a sideshow strongman. With the help of showman Florenz Ziegfeld, Sandow decided it wasn't enough to simply demonstrate his strength, with acts similar to the one pictured above, but to actually display his muscular physique as though it were a work of art. He soon made his muscle displays the main feature of his stage show. Sandow performed all over Europe and organized the first ever bodybuilding contest on in 1901. He called it the Great Competition and was held in the Royal Albert Hall, London, UK. Sandow judged the contest along with Sir Charles Laws and Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. The contest was a huge success and was a sellout, with hundreds of fans turned away. Interesting fact, when Sandow died in 1925, it was reported in the press that he died of a stroke shortly after pushing his car out of the mud. However, his actual death was more likely caused by complications from syphilis. He was buried in an unmarked grave in Putney Vale Cemetery at the request of his wife. At the second spot is Sigmund Breitbart. Breitbart was born in Poland into an Orthodox Jewish family of blacksmiths. Facing continuing challenges from other strongmen and relentless anti-Semites, he was determined not to defame his people. This inspired him and made his astonishing acts of strength even more sensational. His feats included bending iron bars around his arm in floral patterns, biting through iron chains or pulling them apart, and lifting a baby elephant while climbing a ladder. Unfortunately, while on his last tour of Europe, Sigmund was hammering a railroad spike with his bare hands through a 5-inch oak board that was resting on his knee. Like pictured above, the nail pierced his leg, and as a result he contracted blood poisoning. After 10 operations including the amputation of both legs, Breitbart died 8 weeks later. Interesting fact, Before the accident, Breitbart planned to appear in Palestine and recreate the famous feats of Samson to gain worldwide attention for all Jews to join him in creating a Jewish homeland. Also, Breitbart's life was fictionalized in Werner Herzog's 2001 film Invincible. And finally, at number 1, Thomas Topham. Topham was born in London and was one of the most famous strongmen of the 18th century, possessing all-around strength. Topham's feats included bending thick bouquets by striking them against his forearm and being able to lift 224 pounds overhead easily with just his little fingers. His most famous act of strength occurred on May 28, 1741, when Topham lifted 3 barrels filled with water weighing 1,386 pounds. Contributor, Blog Ball. Interesting fact, Topham's feats are faithfully documented in Dr. John Theodis Aguilar's work called A Course of Experimental Philosophy. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video and would like to see more, then please hit the subscribe button.